I somewhat trust that Netflix is being reasonably responsible with like that is basically the top 10, but
Yeah.
it might not be. It might be someone's job in the promotions division of the app development to say, these are the things that we want to push this week. Let's say that they're top 10 so that they show up on the top people's feeds. Like, there's no way to check against that kind of thing.
Cole, welcome back.
Thank you.
We don't get to have you on enough, but we're happy to have you on.
When you do, it's normally because there's some kind of chart or graph that you want to dive into.
For all those
Or it's
listening,
horror.
can you tell us about your history with stats? Have you always loved stats?
I majored in statistics in college. They didn't have a movie review major at the Brigham Young University, and so I majored in statistics instead. I was just good at math as a kid, and so because I wanted to be in the broadcast industry, the closest tie I could make, I mean, I wanted to do sports stats or political stats or movie stats or something.
Yeah.
And so I figured a STEM degree goes a little further than a communications degree if you can get one. And so I did, and then I got a job doing communications anyway. So I don't get to flex that enough, I think.
Well, that's why we have you on today. You're right. Because we want you to flex the stats muscle and the math muscle. Mm-hmm. So we're going to dive into some statistics from a company called Reelgood. Now, as a publication, small or big as we are, we get a lot of pitches. And I don't always love the pitches. Sometimes it's for things we are just not connected to. We have continually gotten pitches about this like gifting room in Los Angeles that has curated gifts, and I'm just not going because we don't get free gifts, first off. Second off, our audience doesn't care about a gifting room. You know, that's not what we're here for. But when I saw something coming from a company called Reelgood, Reelgood.
Oh, I get it.
I was like, okay. I like the data, you know? I'm all about the data. Maybe not as statistics as you are, but I really want to know the data. So we got pitched the Reelgood Top 10 because Reelgood want to take an aggregate of all the services and find out what people are really watching. Now, they're not going to give us exact numbers because the services are not giving us their exact numbers either. But they do have a methodology I want to dig into with you, Cole. And so we want to talk a little bit about the week of April 3rd through April 9th, which will be a little earlier than when this podcast comes out. And I want to talk about what these shows are, what the aggregate says, what movies and movies and TV shows people are actually watching, and how that changes our perception of the marketing push and what they say from each of these streaming services.
Yeah, and this is a little gap where there's a opportunity in the industry because the way that we measure these numbers is constantly changing, right? Nielsen went from just sending out little checkbox forms where you have to write everything down to putting a little box on your TV to keep track of if the TV was on or not. Now, because everything's digital, theoretically, we should have more information and more data than ever. But that data, as you know with your personal data, or as you should be aware of with your personal data, that data is the commodity. And so companies don't want to put out that data that they definitely have unless it benefits them or unless they can get a little bit something for it. So the things that Netflix tells us, or even in quarterly reports from HBO, Warner, Discovery, whatever the heck they call themselves nowadays, we don't inherently trust those. And so we want an outside source. We want a Nielsen-ish to be able to do some measuring on their own with some statistical process behind it to find out what people are actually watching.
Yeah. Are you aware of how the Nielsen ratings used to work and have always worked for television?
I mean, in the 80s and 90s, I remember learning about that in like a Comms 101 class when I was getting a communications minor to go along with my stats major.
Yeah, we're not experts on this, so we'll give a short description here, and I'll also have linked in the show notes a better episode from a different podcast, The Town, which we reference often. But let's talk for a sec. As far as I had known in a quick Google search, Nielsen was tracking TVs with meter devices called autometers that in participating households, people would sign up to be part of Nielsen's service, and they would install one of these meters in their TV, and it would have an audio cue in the television while it was playing each show to say this was on at this person's house at this time. They watched for this much amount of time. Does that sound about right to you?
Oh yeah, yeah, and that was the progression. There, Nielsen had also done the paper forms that they send out too, but the odometer was a really cool thing. Now, if you leave the Discovery Channel on for your dog when you leave for 8 hours in your workday, it thinks that you just watched the Discovery Channel for 8 hours, and so there are flaws to it, but
Yeah.
that's the nature of sampling.
And that town episode I'll link in there. They talk about how right now they're trying to do some similar things with streaming, but between localization and translation and dub and sub and all kinds of different things, as well as just the way that shows are put out and mastered and brought to a streaming service are so different than they used to be. It's more difficult for them to do it than they used to and to get accurate numbers.
And let's talk about the methodology and the reason why anyone would want these numbers, because there's no money in you and me talking about numbers.
No.
Not enough people care to make that worthwhile. The money from getting numbers was always from advertisers wanting
Yeah.
to know who's watching what and when. And so the actual companies themselves who did not have the data, the stations, the CBS and Fox and what have you, wanted to know who was watching what so that they could brag to advertisers and say that we are the most watched network, for example, CBS. And then advertisers would come to them with their advertising dollars and they would get to sell things. Now, because we theoretically think that Netflix and HBO and whatever have these numbers internally, we're just coming at it from a different angle where we're either trying to second witness the idea of what their numbers are through an outside source. We're checking
Yeah.
it, or we're just doing it for the fun of it.
And you know what? We like both reasons, right? At least for me, in seeing the Real Good list, as well as Nielsen publishes their streaming TV top 10, it's a bit more delayed than Real Good for sure, and what each company will bring it themselves. Like, for example, as of this recording on April 24th, we get the Nielsen streaming TV top 10 from March 17th to March 23rd. So at least a good month out
Yeah.
for Nielsen. And in that episode of The Town, they talk a lot about why that is and why they have to take data and talk to streaming services and really make sure they get it right to have an accurate number. But like you're saying, for us, we're going to talk about what's interesting out of this list that we got from Reelgood, why it may or may not be important, and what maybe bucks the trend or is counterintuitive.
Yeah, let's dive into the list.
We have it broken down by three different things. Overall, for all services, TV shows for all services, movies for all services. Should we go through their methodology real quick, though?
Yeah, that would be a good place to start because we talked about how Nielsen used to do it. So let's talk about how Real Good does it today.
Real Good says the Real Good Top 10 ranking uses first party data from interactions with movies and TV shows on the platform in real time from its users in the US, and it breaks down into three different bullet points. It includes the following criteria, which is only titles available on SVOD, subscription video on demand, and or AVOD, ad-supported video on demand platforms. The next criteria, rankings are based solely on organic interactions with any promoted activity excluded. And the third, the service listed alongside each title reflects the platform that received the highest number of interactions for that title. This is important in that day and age that Disney, Hulu have the same things, or you have titles shared between platforms. They just care about the ones that have the highest number of interactions.
To put a bow on criteria 3, they're also not adding things together. So there was a time before
Yes.
Paramount realized what they had in Star Trek as a brand, where Star Trek The Next Generation was on 4 different streaming services all at once, and it didn't matter. And so if we say Star Trek is one of the top 1,000 shows being streamed at any given time, maybe it was because you combine all those numbers together, and that makes sense because when cable was a more prevalent thing, they were also selling it out to G4 and TNT and
Yeah.
TBS, and where you could watch Star Trek on any given the Sci-Fi Channel, whatever. Now those things are getting a little bit more locked down, where even if it's a brand that you own, sometimes you'll sell it out to Netflix for 3 months, and then it'll go off Netflix and it'll come back to you, or you'll sell it to someone else. It's much more exclusive, and so that's a little bit of an easier thing to figure out now, where it's the platform that's the highest, because there's not a lot of crossover anymore. Brands are getting smarter about that.
You're right. They really want to tease you on a different platform to bring you back to subscribe to their chosen platform. I don't know that this will exist this way forever. I doubt it will. I think we're going to have a little more of a shuttering in the next 5 to 10 years where some of the services either bundle or just break down into a combined service. We're already seeing it with sports here and there.
See, and my theory is the opposite, is that it's it is much more profitable, right? How can that be profitable for
Yeah.
Frito-Lay? How it's more profitable for you to sell out and whore out your brands to someone that will actually pay you for it than just to say we're the home of, something that no one cares about. Say, for example, Star Trek, right? I care a lot
Yeah.
about Star Trek. Not a lot of people nowadays care about Star Trek. So Paramount saying we're the home of Picard. Okay, me and 1,500 other people care, but you'll get a lot more money if you can find someone willing to pay you for the rights to take Picard and put it somewhere else.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Picard fans, you have a fan. You have a friend in Cole.
Yes, I will go to bat. Great show, quality wise,
Yeah.
business, different story.
The second criteria. Rankings are
Yes.
based solely on organic interactions with any promoted activity excluded. Do you have questions about this? Does it make sense to you?
Oh, I got a lot of questions, but do we
Let's hear it.
have
Let's hear it.
answers?
What we're going to do is we're going to leave a couple questions that we will ask, and we will follow up with this later. We will have a follow up episode
Yeah.
of this after we get some of these answers back. But what's the most burning question on this criteria?
I mean, how apps are built, everything is promoted, right? Are you only counting things that people go into the search bar and try to find? It's
Yeah.
impossible. That's 12 people.
And I guess it's a weird one because in the 90s or even now, you see a billboard. That is a promotion, an out of home
Yeah.
promotion. You go home and Google, or your co-pilot in the car is like, "Oh, what is the studio on Apple TV Plus? What is
Why is there a
XYZ?
minion looming over the Hollywood sign?
What is Drop? And why is it a movie?" That is still a promotion. How do we know about those things? And yeah, so this is interesting because I want to know, and we can hopefully ask, how are they tracking if this is a promoted post versus an in the feed post? If it's a meta advertising suite pushed promotion versus organically seeing it because your friend sends you the story. That's definitely my question too. Is I don't know how they're tracking that or how accurate that could be.
And this goes back to who is this data for? Because honestly, as a distributor, I want to know that my promotions are working. I'm spending money to use those promotions. I want to know if people are clicking off of that. I don't necessarily want to know about the strength of a particular show or movie or whatever. I want to know that the promotions that I'm pushing are pushing people towards these things.
Yeah, because I've done a bit of promotions for our podcast and magazine over the years, and it's interesting to see cost per click analysis or like the click funnel. Like Spotify does a really good job of telling us, okay, if 1,000 people see this pop up in their home, then this many actually click, this many start, this many finish. That's important to see that whole timeline. I would like you're saying, to know, yeah, why is it important and why are they stating it this way in the criteria, but
Even dumb things like Netflix's top 10 that they curate for you, that's a form of promotional content that they're telling you this is what other people are watching. We have no, I somewhat trust that Netflix is being reasonably responsible with like that is basically the top 10, but
yeah.
it might not be. It might be someone's job in the promotions division of the app development to say, these are the things that we want to push this week. Let's say that they're top 10 so that they show up on the top people's feeds. Like, there's no way to check against that kind of thing.
Yeah, visiting family and logging in and seeing their top tens
Versus
is
my top
always a
10?
shock. Yeah, I'm like, that does not look right. Or like, what's hot? Or, best shows out this week, the most watched. I'm always surprised how different it looks and personally curated. Much
Data
like
is king.
data is king. I mean, my future in-laws are Indian, and I'm always interested when I log into theirs to be like, how many things are on Netflix right now for me that are produced in Hindi or like about Indian families or whatever. I've never seen it on my top 10. Okay, what a change there to be like, okay, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, personalized. Questions that we hope to follow up with for sure. Let's dig into, let's go movies, TV, and then overall. Looking at the movies, and we're going to just go 1 through 10. We'll list them off and the service that they're on. A Complete Unknown was first during that week. Timothée Chalamet, I won't do the Adam Sandler. Anyways, it was on Hulu, and it
And
was
Disney Plus,
and Disney
which
Plus.
is that's going to be the crossover every time.
There's the crossover. The second is The Life List on Netflix. Third is Anora, which was on Hulu. Fourth is Tombstone on Hulu, Val Kilmer, 1993. Fifth is Holland, Michigan, 2017 on Prime. Sixth is Y2K on Max. Seventh, Wicked on Peacock. Eighth, One of Them Days on Netflix, ninth Heat on Netflix, 10th The Substance on Mubi. What struck you first with this list?
More Hulu than I expected. My preconceived notions are that Netflix has such a dominant force, and most numbers that you look up around the internet will support that Netflix dominatingly has more subscribers than everything else. And so any old thing on Netflix would be higher than really good things on other services if you can't find. For example, I don't see any Apple TV
Yeah.
movies on here, even if they had something and even if they wanted to push it, because there's just fewer subscribers to pull from. This goes back to the old data where you look at the all-time numbers of the most watched TV shows ever, and they're all going to be on broadcast channels that everyone had. There's no cable in the top, 50 of any given year or whatever, because broadcast just, even up till like streaming started, even up until about 2009, when you would think that cable was pretty ubiquitous, it was shows on broadcast, not cable, that were getting the numbers because it was just in more houses. And so Netflix is just in more houses. And so that's why we see Netflix shows like Heat, that is not exactly new, showing up in the top 10 because it's got that advantage.
Yeah, I find it interesting looking at these numbers versus the first stats they sent us back, which was March 6th. And again, Hulu is on that list 3 out of the 10. On here, they're 3 out of the 10. Hulu has movies. I don't know what
Pretty
your
good
first
for
streaming
Hulu.
service was. My first streaming service was Hulu back in 2010, 2009 with watching Lost. That was
I
my
mean, yeah,
first experience.
0910 Hulu was you tune in the next day on Hulu to get whatever was on Fox last night.
Yeah.
That's how Hulu worked.
And so over the years, I've heard a lot of people being like, oh, who even watches Hulu? What's on Hulu? It's like, oh, wait a sec. Hulu still has quite a staying force, and it is tuned into often. Look at these statistics. What I find interesting is A Complete Unknown, which came out in theaters December 25th, Christmas last year.
Mm-hmm.
Budget of 70 million, box office 139 million or so. For it to be first place, it just goes to show how many people were like ready and willing to watch it, but not to go to a theater. They were excited, but not excited enough to get out of their seats and, yeah, go buy some popcorn.
And again, this is going to be skewed by the date range that we're looking at because it's released on streaming the week before. Like, this is the second week on streaming, and that's why it's still pretty hot. It was probably still, again, I don't know how they filter out promotional content, but it was probably still a top tile on Hulu saying new to Hulu, Complete
Yeah.
Unknown, go watch it.
I mean, I definitely didn't watch it when it first came on. I saved it for at least a week or two later because I was like, oh, when I'm ready, I'll pop over to Hulu and watch it. Yeah, the second one, the Life List, I'd never heard of. Did you
No,
ever hear about this movie? Okay.
it's one of the Netflix churns, and that's just Netflix numbers helping you out.
Netflix and Netflix numbers 45% on Rotten Tomatoes, 49% on Metacritic. It's like you said, it's on the tile, it's the top 10. Someone clicks it because they trust Netflix. That gets you those numbers. Honora, I mean, Oscar darling, it had to be up there, but it did hit streaming on March 17th, so it had been there a few weeks already. Impressive. And I think that speaks to the word of mouth of, hey, Honora's streaming now. Have you watched it yet?
Yeah, the Oscars ceremony happens the first week of March-ish. It comes out on streaming the second or third week in March, and still by the first week in April when we have these numbers, it's still going strong.
Which leads us to the fourth, which Val Kilmer had passed away on April 1st. This is the week of the 3rd, the 9th. People were watching Val Kilmer. And you know what? I do love that streaming has given us this ability of, oh my gosh, if you lose somebody or something big happens, you're able to go and watch the movies, which we see with Tombstone, which we see with Heat down there, both on our top 10 list. Are you a fan of Tombstone?
Oh, yes.
I mean, classic Western, right? Classic Western.
Western is not exactly my favorite genre, but when I've done like a top 5 in every little subgenre, and Tombstone's up there, man. I enjoy Tombstone.
Tombstone's a good one. Had you ever heard of Holland?
No.
No clue what this movie was.
And this is somewhat our jobs. Like, there was a time where I was a little bit more plugged in than I am today, but these are just coming out of left field, and they're in the top 10.
I'm trying to be pretty plugged in, but there's so much coming out that if it's not, again, pushed with more ads and publicity, who's going to even see these movies? I think I've seen one or two stills about this. It's Nicole Kidman. It's got Matthew McFadden in it. It's got Gail Garcia Bernal. Interesting movie, just weird. Weird that it's up this high. Makes me wonder who was excited to go see it because it wasn't me. But
It's also our only Amazon/MGM offering in this movie list where you talk about being in homes. Prime has a pretty good stranglehold because they got all the 40-year-old moms that just want to get things delivered to them within 2 days. They don't have the kind of traffic on their streamer that their just raw subscription numbers would lead you to believe. And so that's why they're going out and trying to get some of these prestige brands, Bond, MGM, things like that, where they can release good stuff and hopefully get some traffic. And it worked here in this one instance of this one movie getting you into the top 5, but nowhere else. And so that's the struggle of Prime right now.
well, and you're right. They really hit their core demo because Nicole Kidman is America's woman right now. You know what I mean? The Aussie lady is all that they can handle. She's been in these movies with younger men. She's been in Big Little Lies in the past few years.
Yeah.
She is all the rage. And so this movie has like a 21% on Rotten Tomatoes, maybe less at this point. 4.5 out of 10 on IMDb and other places. It's really rough, but it is a quick movie, 108 minutes, that they're able to watch while shopping or just while home or otherwise. Interesting, Nicole Kidman. It's kind of a thriller, they say. It's about a teacher in a Midwestern town in Holland, Michigan. Cool. That's the movies that they should be making. Y2K.
Yeah. In the one last thing to wrap around with Holland, the last week in March, right before we have these numbers, Amazon Prime announced that it was their number one movie worldwide of that week, which tracks, right? It's the number one thing that we see on Prime, but also it's not saying a lot about Prime if this movie that not a lot of people have even heard of is your number one thing.
Go Prime Go. They're still trying to figure out, and this was right around when Jen Psaki departed. So they dropped a movie that's right in their core demo as they're saying, this is not what we want to be doing. Let's move on. Let's talk about Y2K. Did you ever see this movie?
I haven't.
I really wanted to. I don't think it got amazing reviews. Also, on a budget of 15 million, made all of 4.5 million at the box office. It kind of came and went really quickly, but it's produced by Jonah Hill, written and directed by Kyle Mooney of SNL and Bigsby Bear and UCB guy.
Yeah.
Anyways, this is the perfect place for Y2K. Put it on Max. Those kind of people are going to be watching it. Semi-prestige. Good on Max for finding what their audience likes.
And this is the one Max offering that we see in this top 10.
Yep. Which takes us to Peacock. Speaking of another one-off,
Hey.
Wicked is still in the top 10. People love their Wicked.
Wicked should still be in theaters, honestly, the way that musicals tend to have legs on the box office. But here it shows up on Peacock, which means if you accidentally have Peacock through your internet service provider, or if you got a 7-day free trial, if they are still doing that, then you went and watched Peacock, or you went and watched Wicked, and then you probably forgot that you had Peacock for another 6 months after that.
Yeah, the funny part about Wicked 2 is it hit March 21st. So
No, this is Wicked 1. Wicked 2 isn't out yet.
Wicked also, thank you, wordplay. The Wicked Part 1 as well is that it hit Peacock March 21st. It'll stay there till July 20th. And the interesting thing is it's been 2 weeks since with this data, 2 weeks after it hit the service, still in the top 10, and it broke all the records. I mean, it was the biggest streaming hit ever, right?
Yeah.
I guess you just really got to put a lot of money behind something that can be rewatched until the end of time. That's the only way Disney Plus has survived, right?
Yeah. Alternatively, come out with a second thing that people can watch on Peacock when they finish the one thing that you have. At least, yeah, Disney has survived by having Star Wars movies and Marvel movies and and Bluey for all the parents of 2-year-olds out there. Mm-hmm. But it's got more than one thing that you can at least rewatch. And really, so it's Wicked, then it's One of Them Days, Heat, The Substance, right? We can go deep into all these movies, but the real thing that streamers live on and that carries that is TV, right? Rewatchability is not strong on movies the next day, but if you've got 7 seasons of a television show, Peacock, The Office, then by the time people finish it, then they can just start it again, and that's what can keep your subscribers sticking around, right?
Which is interesting because looking at our list of television, this is all new stuff, new seasons, new stories,
Yes, it
which I
is.
love. And we'll go through this quickly,
We
1
get the
through 10.
last, yeah, the last movies. I blew by the substance maybe a little too fast, and you mentioned the heat, so it got its flowers. But Mubi having anything on here is just a victory of the substance and the post-Oscar hangover that we're seeing
And I
for
love
this
that the
time
post
period.
offer hangover is stuck around for the substance because
Yeah,
it is a good movie and it needs to be watched. It's great. And Go Movie. I hope they're keeping subscribers and people coming back because they have a fantastic library on Mubi. Okay, with that note, TV shows.
yeah.
White Lotus, new season. We know that had to be up there. The Bondsman on Prime Video. This is just the perfect show for dads. I don't know. That's kind of what Prime Video is doing here. We have Mobland on Paramount Plus.
Yeah, White Lotus this week that we're talking about season finale. Bondsman this week we're talking about season premiere. So that bumps them up to the top of the list.
That's true. That's true. The Bondsman, Kevin Bacon, White Lotus, yeah, season premiere. Mobland. What else do you have to say there? Dying for Sex. I think that was the premiere right around here on Hulu. The Pit on Max, taking the country by storm. Everyone loves The Pit.
This week was right after their highest rated episodes. Episode 12 and 13 have 9 point whatevers on IMDb. It was kind of what the season was building towards.
Yeah.
And so very strong.
Riding the
I was a
high.
big Pitt fan too.
And Pennsylvania fan had to be a fan of The Pit. Adolescence on Netflix. This has been the rage for the last month plus. The Studio, Apple TV Plus, near and dear to my heart.
You know that?
Number 8, Daredevil Born Again on Disney Plus. Paramount Plus 1923 and The Residents on Netflix wraps out our list. Netflix has 2 on this list. Netflix has 2, Max has 2, Hulu 1, Disney Plus 1, Prime Video 1, Paramount Plus has 2. Go them, Apple TV Plus has 1. Anything surprise you on here? We knew White Lotus was going to be up there.
Yeah.
We knew The Pit was going to be up there. It's such a talked about show. I'm glad to see the studio's still up there. Yeah, anything surprise you on this list other than the
Studio.
fact there's less Netflix?
First of all, I just want to hear you in person. We have texted about the studio. I've read your articles about the studio. I want to hear you in person opine about the studio, but also Apple TV having anything in the top 10. We talk about numbers, pure, like this is like when Game of Thrones and its 1.2 million total subscribers would be in the top of Nielsen things because every single person that has an HBO subscription and 12 of their friends were all watching it. And so they had a 100% success rate. Whereas, the best you could hope for, Blue Bloods was getting 2% of the total people that have CBS, but that 2% is more than the 100% of people that had HBO. But yeah, Apple TV's numbers, just raw numbers, are so much lower that the fact that they get something in the top 10 speaks to the quality.
It does. And you know what? Yeah, to that point, Apple TV has continually tried to curate conversation around themselves without them saying it from their marketing department that they are HBO. They are the new HBO. Looking at the Reelgood streaming charts from March 6th, Severance was number 1.
Yes.
And so there is an issue that they don't have 2 in the top 10. There's an issue of them not having more.
But that means they kept some of their Severance audience, right? Severance was huge. And the fact that the studio, they were just ready to have something else for you to watch. That's what we were talking about with Peacock. After people finish watching Wicked, what are they going to? Question mark.
Yeah.
After people finish watching Severance, you give them something else the next week and we're ready to go.
And you're right. They did a good job at that. And you know what? We're also reviewing Your Friends and Neighbors, which is concurrent with the studio a little bit. So there's a little more to keep you on the service after your episode of studio to go, oh, Friday, there's another episode of a new show. John Hamm, Olivia Munn, Amanda Peet. They're doing a better job. But you're right. I love the studio. And I thought, I was like, oh, here comes the niche movie show that no one's going to want to talk about. That it's going to be my filmy friends enjoy it. Nobody else watches it. And instead, it's got good word of mouth, and it proves here with the numbers. It is being watched by everyone who has Apple TV Plus.
Yeah, that is the thing that screams out to me. What about you? What's the
1923. I know I am not in this demo, but who the hell still watches this? It just goes to show a lot of America really loves the show, and that they are tuning in.
The spin-offs of the show
Sheridan
is what they love. That's what we got to be clear here.
You're right. Taylor Sheridan has done a great job, and his team has, of just wrapping everyone into more of the same, redone different time periods, a couple different actors. Good job. Daredevil Born Again, I didn't I've seen so much hype before the show, but don't know personally anyone who's watched it yet. Did you give it a watch? Was there anything in your list?
I'm waiting. I guess I was waiting for it to all come out, but I think it's done. And yet
Yeah.
I haven't gone back to it. It's also interesting that they put, I was trying to look up and I got logged out of Hulu on my phone, which tells you the last time that I've gotten to watch Hulu. But it's interesting that they mark Daredevil specifically as a Disney Plus show, especially considering the identity issues that Disney was worried about when they merged with Hulu, where they wanted to put all their R-rated stuff on Hulu and keep the PG stuff on Disney specifically. And so
Yeah.
if Daredevil, which is TVMA, like the first few seasons definitely were, I don't know if the current season is, but if Daredevil is only on Disney Plus but not on Hulu, like if they are actually making a delineation where our Marvel stuff is only Disney, even though most everything is Disney and Hulu,
Yeah.
that's interesting. That's interesting coming from the House of Mouse.
It is TVMA. I had to look it up.
And then, so if it's only on Disney and not even on Hulu, which was supposed to be the R-rated TVMA
Yeah.
arm of the Disney enterprises, then turns out we actually just didn't care about any of that, which good for them. I also don't care, but for how much they tried to make us believe that they cared, they didn't.
You know, I think it's only a matter of time until Disney just closes down the Hulu part of it.
It's got to be an international thing, right? Like there's also
It
the
is.
problem of Disney being different outside of the United States. So we have a very like LA myopic lens sometimes on this podcast, but that's just got to, I just assume it is more complicated than we're giving it credit for right now.
Yeah, because Hulu is nowhere else. Hulu's only everywhere else just has it as Disney. It's
And
just
so
Disney
even,
Plus.
yeah, even when that's what it was, even when there
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
delineation and separate thing after, like just after post merger, and they weren't putting everything on everything, things that were Hulu things were showing up on Disney Plus internationally.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Always
so yeah,
Sunny was on Disney.
yeah, while they were telling their American audience that we care about your kids and we don't want them accidentally clicking anything that they shouldn't hear.
We
Yeah,
love
I
the
guess
moral
Hulu,
high ground.
I guess Hulu is not long for this world, is I guess what I can assume from that.
Real quick, adolescence.
Yeah.
It was talked about in the Houses of Parliament in the UK about, hey, we have to make a change based on the show. It's honestly so heavy, I have not been ready to start it. Have you heard much about it among your friends or otherwise?
Just small words of mouth, but no firsthand experience. Like, no, you have to go watch this.
Yeah, it's literally there are people calling for new laws in the UK based on what they've seen in the show, which is crazy to me. But
That's good. Like, so we're talking about like real world action. This isn't a more moral high ground where we can't allow that to be shown on television. This is
No.
because we saw it on TV. We need to change the real world to reflect. That's good.
yeah, it's about a
Good job,
13-year-old
media.
13-year-old boy who is arrested after murdering a girl in his school. And it's about like boys and violence and masculine culture around violence and all these different things that need to be dealt with, especially in violence in schools. And of course, there's the snapback of like, why did it take a TV show to create this law? But you know what? If people are watching and it makes a change, that's what's important. And I love
Because
Stephen
apparently,
Brown.
according to these stats, more people watch TV than, a lot of other things. That's how you get into
Then
homes.
vote? No, we're almost
Well,
there.
it might be.
All right. Anything else with our TV list before we go to the overall?
I love it. And that was pretty good. And so now we're going to get a lot of crossover from the two lists because we're merging them together to see what the number one things were. It's Complete Unknown or White Lotus. Ba-ba-ba-ba.
Would
White
you
Lotus.
have guessed that it was White Lotus over Complete Unknown?
In their season finale week, I guess, probably. It was a pretty monumental, thing.
Yeah.
This might be the most popular season of White Lotus, too. Like, it's been kind of building to this.
Everyone loved Thailand. You're right. I only finally rewatched season 2 recently, so I was a little surprised that the movie was that high up. I would not have guessed with so much TV coming out, new episodes and season finales and premieres and everything else, that you would have a Complete Unknown at number 2. That was my big surprise.
This is
we
another
don't-
numbers question that maybe we can carry into our next conversation, where if people are binging The White Lotus and getting ready for the finale, did it get credit for 1, 2, 3, 4 episodes and then you watched the finale 5 versus Complete Unknown being a 2-hour plus movie
You're
that you
right.
sat down and it only gets credit for 1? Like, what are the raw numbers like? Is it listening hours? Is it, these are questions statisticians have been dealing with since the dawn of data.
That's a good point. And yeah, there's a lot more to watch with the show versus just the one movie, one and done. But in this list as well, I guess the other surprise is it's a flat 5 and 5, right?
Yeah. Top five on both lists. Tombstone and Holland making it in on the bottom end. But yeah, you got in order White Lotus, Complete Unknown, The Bondsman, right in their season premiere,
Mhm.
Mobland, Dying for Sex, The Life List, your Netflix movie, The Pit, and then three more movies. It goes in Nora, Tombstone, Holland.
Yeah, Mobland has a great cast. It's on Paramount Plus. Good on people. It's got Pierce Brosnan, it's got Tom Hardy, it's got a great cast. People who are already on Paramount Plus from 1923 and otherwise, they're watching this. Prime, good on Prime. The Bondsman was so big, it was top 10 overall. They got one on there. Netflix with only one is kind of surprising, and it is the Life List. I just think for a service that everyone has, they must be so all over the place with content or watching old shows or whatever else that it's good that Netflix is releasing new things all the time, but it doesn't seem like that's what's keeping most of America entertained.
It was a few years ago where they made a big deal, though. They were releasing 52 Netflix original movies, one every single week for an entire year. And COVID has since interrupted that, and we don't know if they've gotten back. But even these, you know, poorly reviewed, some would say bad, even these bad Netflix movies can
Yeah.
end up in the top 10 because they got the sheer numbers behind them. But at some point, you get a little attrition. And out of your 52 movies, if only three of them were good, you can only get so many people rewatching Stranger Things, I guess, because you don't have The Office anymore because that goes to its
Yeah.
proper home, and you don't have, all these things are kind of finding their place. And Netflix is left, just buying the rights to Draft Day for the month of April because the NFL draft happens this month. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, what's interesting is looking at the list from March 6th. Netflix does not crack the top movies at all for the week of March 6th. It's all Hulu, Mubi, Max, Peacock, Apple TV Plus with The Gorge, Disney Plus with Moana 2. They have two shows on streaming charts for the week of March 6th, which is Running Point and Zero Day, middle of the pack for the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
And so for overall, they just have Running Point at number 10 there. And you have to wonder for all the money they're spending, yeah, are they just keeping everybody in their own siloed boxes of, you know what, you love rom-coms, you're going to watch 1,000 Netflix rom-coms this year, and that's it. Have at ye. Is it just the breadth of content that keeps everyone in their own little pockets rather than watching the big thing, the eventized show, the big movie of the week?
And at some point, they start to lose everything that isn't their own Netflix original. Then they're not going to be able to have enough rom coms to keep people watching because
Yeah.
at some point you lose the trust of your audience if you're only making really terrible versions of the things that they like.
Interesting to me to know that Netflix is still saying. I mean, there was that recent article about them trying to become the first $1 trillion company, first $1 trillion valuated company, which is just like funny money at that point. What does that even mean? Regardless, there's an opportunity here for someone else to really get in, make curated, fantastic, must-watch TV like Max is doing, and just really kind of change the game and not be the Netflix conversation all the time. If Max was doing White Lotus 6 times a year, something to that level, they would be back to HBO prestige that everyone has to watch. Game of Thrones, right? I mean, they already have it with White Lotus. I don't know what else is coming out this year that I'm going to think is going to be as big, but and good on Apple TV Plus, like you said, for it to be a
Throwing good
smaller.
money. Mm-hmm.
You make something that's good and of quality, and you get the hype out there. It's going to be watched. After Severance, there you go. We're on to Studio. I hope people tune in to Your Friends and Neighbors. That ends end of May, early June. I don't know what's next for them after that. There's a handful of other shows coming out, but not to the same level.
And Netflix still has their Sony deal that they can lean on, right? Sony, one of the only big players in the movie game that doesn't just have their own service. They make their money by selling it to Netflix, and Netflix has to shell over. And so you get something like Madam Web getting more views in the first 2 weeks than Deadpool and Wolverine, despite the difference on Rotten Tomatoes being about 70 points.
Yeah.
They just had more numbers on Netflix to be able to rely on, and they got it in front of more eyes. And so Sony is able to benefit from the eyes of Netflix, and Netflix is able to benefit from the content of Sony. But you're going to need either more partnerships or just better original content in order to sustain. And so, I mean, neither one of us are worried about Netflix. They are,
Yeah.
I guess, on their way to being $1 trillion company for whatever that's worth. I guess it's worth $1 trillion, but whatever that's worth, it, you know,
Yeah.
but to see them only show up once in a top 10, it goes to show what we see when we see Netflix, and that's not a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think I get frustrated at times when people are like, "Oh my gosh, it's the number one show in the country." It's like, well, what does that actually mean? So I'm glad that we have Reelgood and other services out here trying to aggregate the data, give us a little more info so that it's not so blindly just like, "Oh, top show." What does top show mean? Much like Oscars or otherwise, right? I know we kind of feel the same way. People will watch what they're told to watch or what they feel like is in the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
And so, if services like Reelgood continue to kind of publish these numbers, hopefully it serves like a nomination or a top or a Golden Globe or whatever else to say, hey, if you haven't checked it out yet, this is what people are watching. Okay, here's something that's across all services. If you only stay in Netflix, go somewhere else because there's really good shows out there being watched.
It's true.
Any last notes before we wrap up this recap on Reelgood Top 10?
It really was heartening to see a little bit of that balance, that despite what we understand to be the difference in numbers of subscribers between Netflix and Apple TV, for them each to have similar numbers of representation here in this list is good for the content side, the part of me that strives for good content out there and good actual shows and director-driven visions, where these good lesser seen shows are still being given credit for being seen, as well as getting the Oscars and Emmy and whatever, because nominations are going to mean one thing. That means they're good, but also it's got the numbers that people are watching it too. People care about that.
Yeah. You want it to be watched. It makes no bones to a lot of people if a show gets the win and maybe only 1 million people total have ever seen it. You know, like that's a small slice of the pie. So, like you said, good to see a lot of people are actually watching these shows that are kind of prestige TV or writer driven, actor driven, whatever else. I mean, for me at least, seeing Dying for Sex on there, which I've seen a few billboards across LA about, and it's been on my list of like, oh, should I check this out? Kind of a weird premise. To see it was number 4, okay, that's a good sign. People are watching it. People are not just going to pre-existing IP or whatever. There's a lot on here that say, you know, like The Pit or otherwise, new shows, new ideas, sometimes cliched or tropey or whatever else, but they're
But at
willing to
least
give them a
it's
watch.
new IP. Yeah, the fact that Daredevil Born Again in 1923 are probably the only things truly tied to something bigger. Now it's White Lotus season 3, right?
Yeah.
But that's just a show that continues, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Even Wicked being the biggest budget movie on here, based on a play that's also based on a book, and we have another movie about that book, a couple movies, but that's pretty good as far as original content compared to where we were in this industry 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Things to be excited for, and for writers and people interested in pitching shows or what do they want to see. Looking at a list like this and having this going into your pitch meeting, it's helpful to say, hey, you know what? More than your Marvels, more than your 50,000th Fast and Furious movie or whatever else, people are willing to give it a watch based on other things. And so there's a way to market a show like The Pit or a movie like Y2K, even after it leaves theaters, to say, hey, there is an audience for it as long as you do it in the right way. People want to watch good TV and movies.
I forgot the Fast and Furious didn't have their last movie come out yet. Seems like forever ago I watched Fast X, and we haven't gotten Fast X Part 2, which is the 11th or 12th, depending on how you count them. Fast and Furious.
Yeah. Well, and there was always a discussion of how can they make it a television show, and I don't think they've done it yet. So
They also discussed how they could bring in Jurassic Park. So you
And
never know what
22
you're going to
Jump
get.
Street. Oh boy,
That'll do it. That's pretty good.
Day. That will do it. For everyone, we're going to have Reelgood linked in our show notes. We're going to have some of the movies and shows we've talked about today and where to watch them if you're interested in tuning in. And keep listening to our podcast. We will have a recap episode, possibly with someone from Reelgood to talk us through more of these stats and what it means for the industry at large. Until then, watch good TVs and movies, and thanks again for coming on, Cole.
You bet.